families have at least one foreign-born parent.
And on that point, we will close a statistical look at the foreign-born population in the United States. You have a great weekend. Thanks for being with us. Now to the House of Representatives.
The work of its members. Give them strength, fortitude, and patience. Fill their hearts with charity, their minds with understanding, their wills with courage to do the right thing for all of America. As it is so often easy for all of us to focus on what separates one from another, may our understanding that you have created us as one people remind us of the values that bind us all together as Americans in the human family. May that reminder empower the members of this House to act courageously in the work they have to do for all Americans. May all that is done this day be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
The Chair has examined the Journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the Journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Nunley.
Please join me as we pledge our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain up to 5 requests for 1-minute speeches from each side. For what purpose does the gentleman from Mississippi rise? Without objections, ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mississippi experienced a great loss this week with the death of Governor Bill Waller. He served as our governor from 1972 to 1976, and he provided steady leadership during tumultuous times in our state. He believed that Mississippi should be a place of liberty and justice for all. Under his leadership, we had the largest pay raise for teachers in our state's history up to that point, the most significant investment in infrastructure and highways up to that point, all while leaving our state with the largest surplus in its history up to that point. Mississippi is a better place because of Governor Waller's leadership, and this week we mourn his passing. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Maine seek recognition? Without objection, gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this week I voted against H.R. 3094, the so-called Workplace Democracy and Fairness Act, or as it has become known, the Election Prevention Act. This bill's sole purpose is to delay and prevent workers from voting in workplace elections. It proposes a 35-day mandatory waiting period before a union election can be held. It encourages frivolous suits to be filed against union formation, and it allows companies to hand-pick union voters. In Maine, we have a tradition of incredibly hard-working people who are essential to the health, education, and safety of our families. Collective bargaining has been at the heart of American labor since the rise of trade unions during the 19th century. Thanks to strong unions and thousands of workers, over the years we have child labor laws, maternity leave, and we don't have to fear unemployment if we get sick. I am proud to stand here today with organized labor and with the NLRB, which has served our workers so well. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
1 minute.
Without objection, gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I recently received this email from John of Houston giving the pulse of Texans. As one of the 9.2 million people whose livelihood is supported by America's oil and natural gas industry, I am troubled by recent calls to raise taxes on our industry, one of the few bright spots in the American economy. Despite an economic slowdown, the oil and gas industry is creating jobs and can create many more. As Washington focuses on improving our struggling economy, Congress has an opportunity to take our economy in a new direction, one that leads to economic growth and economic security. By promoting policies that encourage domestic oil and natural gas production, we can create 1.4 million jobs and generate $800 billion in additional government revenue by 2013. Mr. Speaker, John, a person that works for a living, understands better than Washington elites that our God-given natural resources should be used to create jobs for Americans. Time to stop sending American money and jobs to Middle Eastern countries to buy their natural resources and start supporting American energy workers and American businesses. And that's just the way it is.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island seek recognition?
Asking unanimous consent, Mr. Speaker, to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, by extending and expanding the payroll tax cuts, I'm asking the House to pass the expansion of the payroll tax cuts, which will put more money in the pockets of Americans and boost economic growth and job creation. American workers have received bigger paychecks in 2011 because of the payroll tax cut, helping families to pay their grocery bills, pay their rent, mortgages, and supporting local businesses. Allowing the payroll tax cuts to expire at the end of this month will result in less money in the pockets of hardworking middle-class families at a time when our economy and our families can least afford it. With global financial uncertainty threatening our domestic recovery, this is not the time to take money out of the pockets of working families. A family earning $50,000 a year will receive a tax cut of about $1,000 if the 2% payroll tax cut is extended. For Rhode Island, this would add $400 million to the paychecks of roughly 600,000 workers. Expanding the payroll tax cut to 3.1%, as the President has proposed, could increase the flow of capital into our local economy in Rhode Island to approximately $700 million. It's time for Congress to stand up for working American families by extending and expanding the payroll tax cut now.
What purpose does the gentlelady from Kansas seek recognition? Without objection, gentlelady is recognized.
Last week I had the immense pleasure of joining the folks at Fort Leavenworth for the change of command ceremony to welcome Lieutenant General David Perkins to the new commanding general of Fort Leavenworth, home of the prestigious Command and General Staff College. It was fitting that General Perkins, a West Point grad, distinguished Iraq war commander, and decorated career serviceman, took his post during Military Family Appreciation Month, as his two children, Chad and Cassandra, both serve in the Army. There is no doubt that General Perkins, his wife Ginger, and their two wonderful children exemplify what it means to be a military family. I want to extend a warm welcome to General Perkins and my deepest thanks to departing General Robert Caslin, who has left Fort Leavenworth for his new post as Chief of Security Cooperation in Iraq. Thank you both for your service to the Fort Leavenworth community and to our country. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Census Bureau recently reported that 100 million Americans are on the brink of poverty. Maybe now Tea Partiers here in Georgia, in Congress, will realize what millions of people already know, and that is Americans are barely getting by, and the misguided Republican agenda of deregulation, higher taxes for the middle class, and tax cuts for the rich will do nothing for those who are struggling. We should extend the payroll tax cut, toss a lifeline to struggling Americans who can barely make ends meet, and stop holding small businesses and American families hostage with the threat of higher taxes. I hope my Tea Party colleagues will take the moment to put the interest of the majority of Americans over those of overpaid bankers and oil executives. We must extend the payroll tax cut and help renew opportunity and restore the American dream to the American people. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite the Supercommittee's inability to come to a bipartisan agreement recently, we cannot stand idly by and hope that someone will fix the problem. Rather, we must come together to find common ground today. In the President's address before this body just a short time ago, he called for the removal of burdensome regulations on small businesses. I certainly hope that that's something that both Republicans and Democrats can agree upon. As a small business owner, I know that the economic uncertainty facing job creators today is largely based upon the threat of thousands of pages of new regulations that are coming out day after day. What we need to do is implement smart regulations and repeal duplicative and burdensome regulations that stand in the way of job creation. We can all agree that we want clean air, clean water, a healthy environment, and consumer protection. So let's come together and implement smart regulations and get rid of the red tape and excessive regulations that are keeping our job creators and entrepreneurs from growing and expanding their businesses and hiring more workers. Let's get America back to work. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
I agree. Let's do something meaningful to put America back to work. Let's put millions to work rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. Speaker promised us we'd do that this month. The Republicans would bring a surface transportation bill to the House, and they said, no, can't figure out how to pay for it. It's more important to continue tax cuts for the rich. Now, with millions unemployed, can't find jobs, the Republicans want to jerk their lifeline. They want to kill off extended unemployment benefits to do what? Preserve tax cuts for the rich, the job creators. Well, they're doing a heck of a job creating jobs, aren't they? This is the discredited theory of trickle-down economics. And guess what? America's unemployed are being trickled on, and it stinks.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from Louisiana is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this president simply does not understand America's energy needs. 2 weeks ago, this administration let politics trump policy by needlessly delaying the Canadian Keystone XL pipeline. This is inexcusable. The pipeline would carry 1.1 million barrels of oil per day to Gulf Coast refineries, create 20,000 American jobs, and inject millions of dollars into local economies. Instead, the Canadian Prime Minister announced Canada will sell its oil to China. Mr. Speaker, I've proudly supported numerous bills that will create American jobs and promote American energy production. Putting the Gulf of Mexico Back to Work Act, Restoring American Offshore Leasing Now Act, reversing President Obama's Offshore Moratorium Act. These three bills will all promote American energy production and American jobs, and yet they're sitting in the Senate without action. Let's pass these bills. Let's get them through the Senate. Mr. President, sign these bills and promote American energy production, American energy security, and American jobs. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we've entered the 12th month of the Republican majority in this House, and if the past 11 are any indication, December will be a continuation of the GOP no jobs agenda. My colleagues in the majority have shown no interest in tackling America's real economic challenges, no interest in the fact that small business owners say that weak sales, not government regulation, are the main source of their struggle. No interest in the fact that it is tax relief for middle-class families, not tax giveaways to corporations and to billionaires that our economy needs to boost consumer demand, and no interest in preventing the expiration of unemployment benefits for millions of struggling families and the havoc it would wreak on our economy. Mr. Speaker, the majority's interest seems focused on one thing, an election still nearly a year away. Americans want Congress to work for them. It's time we stand up for the middle class. Working families need us to work for them. I yield back.
Yields back. The gentleman from Texas seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on H.R. 3010.
Without objection, so ordered. Pursuant to House Resolution 477 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House and the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of H.R. 3010. The Chair appoints the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Womack, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 3010, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to reform the process by which federal agencies analyze and formulate new regulations and guidance documents.
Pursuant to the rule, the bill is considered read the first time. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Smith, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Conyers, each will control 30 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself such time as I may.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, employers across America face an avalanche of unnecessary federal regulatory cost. Federal regulations cost our economy $1.7 trillion every year, over $15,000 for each household, according to the Small Business Administration. Yet the Obama administration seeks to add billions more to that cost. The administration's record-setting issuance of major regulations is particularly troubling. By its own admission, the administration's 2011 regulatory agenda contains 200 regulations that typically will affect the economy by $100 million or more every year. For employers, the people who create jobs and pay taxes, the impact of these costly regulations is clear. Government regulation has become a barrier to economic growth and job creation. Faced with huge new regulatory burdens and uncertainties about what will come next, employers slow down hiring, stop investing, and wait for a bill from the Obama administration. What enables the administration to issue so many new regulations with so little regard for their cost is the outdated Administrative Procedure Act. Enacted in 1946, the APA's minimal limitations on rulemaking have hardly changed in decades and do nothing to control cost. The Regulatory Accountability Act fixes this problem by bringing the APA up to date. Under its common sense provisions, agencies are required to assess the cost and benefits of regulatory alternatives. Unless interests of public health, safety, or welfare require otherwise, agencies must adopt the least costly alternative that achieves the regulatory objectives Congress has established. The Regulatory Accountability Act has bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate, including from a number of House Democrats who have co-sponsored the bill. In large part, this is because its provisions are modeled on the executive orders that Presidents Reagan, Clinton, Bush, and Obama have issued to compensate for the APA's weaknesses. Opponents of the Act claim that it requires the benefits of all new regulations to exceed their cost. They argue that as a result, the Act will prevent federal agencies from issuing important new public health, safety, and welfare regulations. This is false. The Regulatory Accountability Act only requires agencies to adopt the lowest cost regulatory alternative that achieves the agency's statutory objectives. This assures that agencies will achieve all of those objectives, but with much lower cost. Opponents also assert that the Act's new procedural requirements will halt all federal rulemaking. But the Act primarily codifies existing executive order principles and practices under which agencies have been able to issue regulations for years. The Act's few additional requirements all are streamlined. They will improve the quality and lower the cost of regulations, but they will not unduly delay them. The Act increases the transparency of the rulemaking process with more advance notices of proposed rulemaking, more opportunities for public comment, and more opportunities for public hearings. This will lessen the influence of all special interest. The Regulatory Accountability Act provides the greatest opportunity yet for Republicans and Democrats to join together and lower the job-killing cost of regulations. And it allows costs to be lowered while it assures that all of Congress's regulatory objectives are in fact attained. The bill also provides a clear opportunity for the votes of Democrats in Congress to match President Obama's words on regulatory reform. In his State of the Union address, the President said that, quote, "To reduce barriers to growth and investment, when we find rules that put an unnecessary burden on businesses, we will fix them," end quote. In Executive Order 13563, the President said that, quote, "Our regulatory system must promote economic growth, innovation, competitiveness, and job creation, must allow for public participation and an open exchange of ideas, must identify and use the best, most innovative, and least burdensome tools for achieving regulatory ends, and must take into account benefits and cost," end quote. The President was right. The Regulatory Accountability Act does just all those things. I urge all my colleagues to support the Regulatory Accountability Act, and I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. The gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
I want to begin our discussion this morning with the reference that the federal regulations impose an annual cost of $1.75 trillion on business. I would like the members to know that the reference made to this study is the Crane study. I'd like to use the name so that you can track exactly what is being said about it. The study was never intended to be used as a decision-making tool. Who says this? They said it as a preface to the study itself. And for the benefit of the 433 other members besides myself and the chairman, I'm going to put this in the record and also make it available to all of our colleagues on the Judiciary Committee. The Crane study was never intended to be used as a decision-making tool. And the Congressional Research Service, our own operation, criticized much of this Crane study's methodology and noted that the authors of the Crane study themselves told the Congressional Research Service that their analysis was not to be a decision-making tool for lawmakers or federal regulatory agencies to use in choosing the right level of regulation. So every time somebody mentions this study again on the floor, I am going to refer them to the Congressional Research Study, which has never been disputed or declaimed by anybody. In no place in any of the reports do we imply that our reports should be used for this purpose. That's the Crane study people themselves. That's not the Congressional Research Study. That's the authors. And here is the Congressional Research Study that I would ask unanimous consent to introduce into the record at this time.
The request is covered under general leave.
The Center for Progressive Reform is another study that notes that the $1.75 trillion cumulative burden cited by the study fails to account for any benefits of the regulation. I am going to, at the appropriate time, introduce that into the record. The Congressional Research Service notes that the study's methodology is seriously flawed with respect to how it calculated economic costs. So I would urge the members to be aware of what I am going to do during this debate the next time somebody names this study without naming the name of the study, and the fact that it was put together by Mark and Nicole Crane, commonly called the Crane Study. The study, the Congressional Research Service notes that the study's methodology is seriously flawed with respect to how it calculated economic costs. The study relied on international public opinion polling by the World Bank on how friendly a particular country was to business interests, ignored actual data on costs imposed by the federal regulation in the United States. The Congressional Reference Service concluded
that a valid, reasoned policy decision can only be made after considering information on both costs and benefits of regulation. Now, the next thing I would like to do is examine what seems to be a political or legislative strategy that is being used in this debate. You see, there are 3 bills that are anti-regulatory bills, and there's no question or dispute about that, designed to slow or halt rulemaking and give industry more opportunities to disrupt the rulemaking process of the federal government. H.R. 3010, which we are taking up today, is one of them. H.R. 527, which we took up yesterday, is another one of them. H.R. 10, the king of all regulatory, anti-regulatory bills, is coming up next week, the REINS Act, which for the first time in American history determines that the Congress must also approve the rules of all the agencies over which there are some 40 or 50. And for the benefit of every member of the Congress, I am getting together every agency that would now be involved and that would have to have their rules. Believe it or not, this is not Saturday Night Live, would come through the Congress. Can you imagine what that would do to our schedule? And so these bills are blatantly and unhesitatingly designed to slow down and even halt all federal rulemaking, thereby threatening public health and safety by undermining the agency's ability to address a whole range of issues. What about food-borne illnesses? What about toy safety? What about infant formula safety? What about financial security? All 3 anti-regulatory bills also give industry more opportunities to disrupt the rulemaking process. The bill under consideration now, for example, requires formal rulemaking and expands opportunities to challenge agency action in court, as if they need any help from the corporate lawyers that are all lined up to do their work at the present moment. But no, we want to give them more opportunities to go in court, as if they can't figure it out for themselves. H.R. 527 of the previous day does this by expanding the use of small business review panels. The measure coming up next week would require Congress to approve all major rules. Not only do we have to do that, but we have to do it within 70 legislative days before they could take effect. Effectively, of course, allowing industry to intervene in Congress to stop a rule. And so, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, before I yield to the gentleman from North Carolina, I yield myself 30 seconds.
Gentleman is recognized for 30 seconds.
Mr. Chairman, here is another poll that I'm going to cite that will support what this administration's own Small Business Administration has found about the cost of these regulations. This is an article by the Gallup poll. The article is dated October 24, 2011, just a few weeks ago. Here's the headline on the article. Government regulations at top of small business owners' problem list. 1 in 3 small business owners are worried about going out of business. Article is written by Dennis Jacoby, chief economist. Here's the first line and the finding of the Gallup poll. Small business owners in the United States are most likely to say complying with government regulations, 22%, is the most important problem facing them today, followed by consumer confidence in the economy, 15%, and lack of consumer demand, 12%. Mr. Chairman, arguably, the administration is responsible for every one of these problems because of the administration's policies. Mr. Chairman, I'll now yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Coble, who is the chairman of the Courts, Commercial, and Administrative Law Subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee.
Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 5
Chairman,
minutes.
I thank the chairman from Texas, Mr. Smith. I thank you for yielding. Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of H.R. 3010. I reiterate what I said yesterday regarding regulatory legislation that when critics accuse those of us who support it, furthermore accuse us of being willing to compromise health and safety standards. Not guilty, but we are guilty of trying to reduce the number of redundant, excessive regulations, bad, onerous regulations. To that I do plead guilty. As I meet with representatives from industries in my congressional district and other districts here in Washington, one message is eminently clear. Our regulatory process is out of control. There's enormous uncertainty over what actions agencies will take. There's uncertainty over which agencies have jurisdiction, and there's concern about the actions of independent agencies. It is important to note that these perceptions are not a part of a larger campaign to discredit the Republican or Democratic agendas. They highlight a growing perception that our government is simply out of touch. The process is missing checks and balances, which is the cornerstone of our democracy, while regulators have virtually limitless resources and power. The result has enabled special interests to impose their will on certain areas of our regulatory system after clearing few hoops and low hurdles. This was not the intent of the Administrative Procedures Act and explains the legacy of executive orders requiring that agencies issue narrowly tailored, less costly alternatives that began with the Reagan administration. Other costs continue to hit close to home, Mr. Chairman. They drive businesses to other countries, costing thousands of jobs. Many will argue that regulations create jobs. That may well be true of good, sound regulations, but ask many of the employers who have relocated their manufacturing facilities, and they will tell you it's in large part due to our regulatory government. Every industry in America is concerned about our regulatory regime, and there is little doubt that bad regulations have driven American jobs to other countries. The solution is not more regulation, Mr. Chairman. It's better and more effective regulation, which is exactly what H.R. 3010 is intended to create, much like H.R. 527, the Small Business Regulatory Reform Bill that we approved yesterday. When the Administrative Procedures Act was implemented, few imagined that our government would issue a regulation that would threaten the viability of an entire industry. Today, unfortunately, many would say this has become the routine practice. Prime examples are the EPA's MACT rule, OSHA's noise radiance, and HHS's grandfather plan rule. Some describe them as misguided, and others would say they're downright reckless. H.R. 3010 addresses the situation by implementing new requirements that will give stakeholders a legitimate opportunity to improve regulations as they are proposed, promulgated, and ultimately implemented. In fact, most of the reforms included in this legislation simply codify President Obama's Executive Order 13563, improving regulation and regulatory review. Finally, the bill will not change any existing regulatory standard or requirement. The overwhelming view from my congressional district is that federal regulations are driving American ingenuity and opportunity to other countries. Improving our regulatory process may be one of the most significant legislative contributions that we can provide to help preserve our safety and provide economic opportunity for future generations. Mr. Chairman, we continue to hear jobs, jobs, jobs echoed from shore to shore, border to border. This is a good piece of legislation, and I urge my colleagues to support it and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now recognize Steve Cohen of Tennessee, the ranking member of the subcommittee on courts, commerce, and administrative law. 5 minutes.
Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the ranking member for the time. I have a nice speech that was written by a fantastic staffer that I'm not going to use today, because I've used it in the past, and most of the speeches today have been used, or parts of them, on the other bills we've had. Because of what we've done this week, and there's wonderful gentlemen on the opposite side, Mr. Smith and Mr. Coble are two great, wonderful people who I think dearly of. They just have different philosophies than I have, different perspectives. And these bills have been bills to basically be anti-government bills. And that's what this Congress has been about. It's been about being anti-government, and it's been about defeating the President of the United States. And these bills which we've got would destroy the Administrative Procedure Act and destroy the whole process of government that we've known for decades. The fact is, President Bush had as many, if not more, rules than President Obama. But we didn't hear from the other side anything about the nefarious rules-making process, the need for reform, the jobs that could be created by eliminating the rule-making authority or stifling it and changing it, until President Obama became the president. And we heard this morning from the other side that it's the administration that's at fault because of all the rules they've produced, and now they say, oh, some of the rules could change. Well, they're saying, oh, it's the administration that's at fault for all the rules they passed. Well, they made less rules than President Bush made. And there was silence on the other side, silence. All of a sudden there's a roar. And this whole week, when we need jobs, when our economy needs jobs, when our people need unemployment compensation, unemployment insurance, continued for the 99ers. Not the 99%, although they're part of that, the 99ers in terms of weeks they get unemployment insurance. When we need the doctors and the medical folks to get the Medicare fix that we always put in to make sure that we continue to pay doctors a reasonable rate to treat our Medicare patients, we're not dealing with that. And when we need to be dealing with the payroll tax cut for the middle class, we're not dealing with that. We spent a whole week on destroying government and being anti-government. You know, Rick Perry, one of the candidates for president on the other side, has talked about making Congress half-time. How could we be half-time when we're not accomplishing our jobs and creating jobs full-time? And as Mr. Conyers talked about, next week we get the mother of all anti-government bills, the REINS Act, which really is reigning in government, a bill that would require every rule to be passed by both the House and the Senate and signed by the President within 70 or 75 days before it goes into effect. That's Star Wars. Or it's anti-Star Wars. It's really a big dark hole out there in the universe where all rules and regulations would go and die and never be seen again and just disappear. Well, that's not the way government's supposed to work or should work. And if we had that, how could we work half-time under President Perry? We'd have to be working time and a half. And we know there's not enough money for overtime, and President Perry doesn't want us to do that. He wants us to get a separate job when we go home. We go back to San Antonio, we work half-time as a congressman, and half-time we work at Walmart. That's what he's suggesting. Who would really love this bill? The tobacco companies. Wouldn't it be great if we didn't have rules and regulations on tobacco? We didn't put little notices on tobacco that smoking can kill you, smoking can cause damage to infants, that pregnant women shouldn't drink or smoke. Oh yeah, tobacco companies would love this. Those rules and regulations, very burdensome, giving notice to people about the dangers of tobacco, which Europe's been doing forever and which we need to put an end to because it costs us so much in medical cost and the loss of precious lives. The polluters would love this. The destroyers and the plunderers of our environment, they'd love it because, wow, ollie ollie and free. We can do whatever we want. Removal of mountains, drilling in the ocean, more oil spills, but less regulation. In an emergency, the government can't even respond to clean up the mess. You know, that's what they're talking about. It's all phrased in the tones of small business, small business, small business. Small business is wonderful. We do a lot with small business. Small business is a jobs creator. But this affects big business as well. And it's big business who's behind this, not small business. Small business is the front used to help the polluters, the tobacco companies, and the others that don't want to see regulations that protect the American public's food, air, water, transportation, and other areas. We've had the issue of judicial review has come up, and in this bill, we give the courts more power than they otherwise have. The other side usually talks about the importance of the judicial branch simply being an equal partner, but in this position, the judicial branch could review any rule and regulation and make their own determination of a cost-benefit analysis without expertise that the agencies have, and it would be the judiciary that had the final say. So they give more power to the courts and more power, in fact, to the administration in the OIRA office in the White House would have more power than ever. So it's antithetical to much of which the other side argues about. This is not a good bill. It's not good government, and I would ask that we all vote against it and we get back to the jobs that we should be for, creating jobs for the American people and getting us out of this deep, dark, long recession. Thank you, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
Time has expired. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I'll yield myself a minute.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, we hear a lot of words that are really irrelevant to the bill that we are considering here today. Once again, let me repeat that the Regulatory Accountability Act only requires agencies to adopt the least cost regulatory alternative that achieves the agency's statutory objectives. It therefore assures that in all instances, agencies will achieve those objectives, whether to protect public health, safety, or welfare, or to satisfy some other statutory purpose. The RAA's key contribution is to require that once agencies have identified means to achieve their statutory objectives, they will simply choose the means that impose the lowest cost. I don't know how anyone could object to that. This creates a positive cycle in which agencies and regulated entities compete to identify innovative, least-cost means to achieve statutory objectives while they simultaneously produce the most benefits. I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased now to recognize the former chairman of the Education and Labor Committee, the ranking member currently, George Miller of California. I yield him as much time as he may consume.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. And, Mr. Speaker, this is a very sad day for America's workers. This country has spent great time and effort, along with the industrial base and the business base in this country, to make sure that when workers go to work every day, they will return safely to their home. This legislation begins to bring that to an end, because it would needlessly and recklessly expose our nation's workers to preventable work-related death and injuries. It would do this by obstructing the ability of the federal agencies to adequately respond to real safety and health concerns of our nation's workplace. Under the current law, both the Occupational Safety and Health Administration and the Mine Safety Health Administration would be tasked to protect workers from exposure for risk and toxins over the working lifetime. However, this legislation would override that task. It would change the nature of the idea of protecting workers in the workplace to make sure we have the most effective means possible to protect those workers. It wasn't the dust standards that killed the textile industry in the southeastern part of the United States. The dust standards that were invoked in 1978 that were railed against by the textile industry, in fact, extended the life of the textile industry by making it more efficient, by bringing in a new generation of technology to that industry. What killed those textile industries were free trade agreements. They were among the most efficient mills in the world. They just couldn't stand up against the unfair competition from the Chinese and their textile industry. So let's understand what's happening here. This bill would change the standard of providing the most protective standard that is feasible to providing a standard that picks the least costly approach. The least costly approach to protecting your hearing is to cover your ears. Cover your ears while you're working on a ramp at an airline factory. Cover your ears while you're putting bags on an airplane. Cover your ears. That's the least costly. Eye protection, close your eyes. Cover your eyes. That's the least costly. That doesn't work in the workplaces of America, and the employers know it. The employers know it. What do you say to an iron worker working on a bridge? What do you say to an iron worker working on a skyscraper? Hold on tight? Hold on tight? We saw what happened when they went to the least costly, effective restraints on workers working on skyscrapers in Las Vegas. They were killing them. record rate of killing construction workers. But they had the least costly. They didn't think they should have to string a net 3 floors down to catch the workers as they fell. They just chose another method, the least costly. That's the Republican answer to safety in the workplace? Stick your fingers in your ear? What do you do about breathing toxins? Get yourself a paper mask? You know, when we started changing the vinyl chloride standards, not only did it make the workplace more efficient, it protected the workers, it created a byproduct that had great commercial value and expanded the industry by making it more efficient. What they used to waste, they now sell. What they used to waste and injure workers with, they now sell. That's the difference. This standard, the least costly approach, don't tell that to United States Steel in my district. I just went on a safety tour with the workers and with the management. And they told me how they've changed the traffic patterns, the pedestrian patterns, the vehicle codes, all of the changes inside of the steel mill. Because they want injury-free days, injury-free months, and injury-free years. Take a tour of the Chevron refinery in my district, Dow Chemical, DuPont. Safety is their #1 job daily in that facility. They take pride in it. They invest a lot of money in it because they know what an unsafe workplace, what a dirty workplace, what a cluttered workplace costs them in lost time and productivity. This bill goes counter to the best practices in industry, counter to the best practices in small businesses. This just doesn't work in modern industry. This is a throwback to the 70s or the 60s, where miners were just assumed they had to consume coal dust and die of black lung. Where steel workers they fell into open hearth furnaces in the old mills. Today you can get run over by a cold roll conveyance system. You can get caught up in a line, in a rolling line. But you don't, because they invest in your safety. And now the American government is telling them you won't have to invest in this safety. I think for most industries, they're going to ignore that because they've been to the other side. They know what it was like to have casualties. And they know that that doesn't work. They know they can't stand. You can bankrupt the companies with black lung today and cotton dust. You know, we still have grain elevators blow up in this country. When I came to Congress, they were blowing up on a daily basis. But we have dust standards now, and we save workers' lives. But we still tragically have a few accidents. You can ignore the standards that they did on the British Petroleum rig, and you can kill the workers because you avoided the process safety standards on that rig. In Texas City, in Texas, you can blow up the workers because you ignored the standards, and they knowingly ignored them. That was the least costly they thought of British Petroleum, was to ignore the standards. When they went to the boardroom in London and they raised this issue with the board of directors, they chose the least costly approach. They chose the least costly approach. And they had one of the worst safety records in America, British Petroleum, of blowing up their own facilities and killing their workers. They chose the least costly approach. This legislation then imposes, if you want to do something right, it's just delay for delay's sake. And the chairman has pointed out, and Mr. Cohen has pointed that out, how you just turn this over to a litigation process before you ever get around to the question of protecting your workers. This legislation makes the workplace that our family members go to, that our neighbors go to, that our friends go to, less safe than it is today. It impedes the progress to apply new technologies, to new knowledge, to the workplace to make it safer. That's what this legislation does. That's not what a modern corporation wants. That's not what a modern workplace should be for workers who go into it, and it's not where they want to go to work. It's just unacceptable that we would have this legislation at this time in our history. This legislation is an attack on the workplaces where middle-class Americans go to work. These are their workplaces. These are the hot, heavy, dirty workplaces. These are the complex workplaces that pose risk to the injury and illness to the workers in our place. This causes you to fall out of the middle class Millions of Americans are falling out of the middle class because of the income disparity in this country and the unfairness in this country. There's another way to fall out of the middle class. You can fall out of the middle class. It's not just a question of lower pay. You can get hurt on the job. You lose your income. You become disabled. You can't go back to your full earnings. You end up on a disability program because you were injured on the job. All you did was show up and go to work. But under this legislation, you're more likely to be hurt. You can reverse the dramatic downturn in black lung, as we saw in the Massey mines where they wouldn't clean up the coal dust. And they killed 29 workers in the process, over thousands of warnings. But the lawyers and the litigators prevented the standards ever from coming into place, the penalties from ever being into place. They completely gamed the system. That's how you can fall out of the middle class. Or you can die in an explosion, as people did in Tennessee earlier this year, as they did in Georgia earlier this year, because dust standards weren't properly met. Or as happened in Connecticut, where they didn't apply the safety standards to disconnecting the natural gas lines. Yes, you can do that, and you fall right out of the middle class. You lose your spouse in a construction site, in an injury, a trench caves in, a worker falls off a skyscraper. That's how you can fall out of the middle class, and it happens to American families every day. We made a decision as a nation that we would go in a different direction. We would look out for these workers. We would provide margins of protection. We would improve the safety in the workplace. This legislation undoes that for workers all across the country. The least costly way. You know, I worked in the refineries in my district, and I saw workers fall face down in the bottom of those huge oil tanks that we were cleaning out because they had no respiratory gear, because it was before OSHA. I saw workers throw up. I worked on the tankers going out to sea, and I saw workers fall a couple of stories into an empty oil tank on an oil tanker because they weren't connected to the ladders. There was no safety device. You went up the ladders, but if the fumes got you first, you fell. I saw workers that couldn't tell you what day it was when they came out of those tanks after cleaning them. I saw workers fall into vats in the canneries when I worked in the canneries. I saw workers on construction jobs get hit by moving equipment when I worked in construction jobs. This isn't speculation. This is what happens to people all across this country. Every day they go to work. And yet we stand here in the Congress of the United States and we say we want to make sure when your member of your family goes to work that they return home safely every day. That's not what this legislation does. This legislation makes it more likely that they're not going to return home safely, and they're not going to return home at all. We ought to reject this legislation and understand how far back in the past it takes us. It's against the best business practices of this nation. It's against all of the success we've had in making the workplace safety safe for the workers and safe for the employers and safe for the profit measure.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself 15 seconds.
The gentleman is recognized.
The AFL-CIO has backed up what the ranking member, Mr. Miller of Education and Labor, has said. They warn that H.R. 3010 would upend more than 40 years of labor, health, 15 more seconds. It would upend more than 40 years of labor, health, safety, and environmental laws and threaten new needed protections. It would cripple the regulatory process and make protecting workers and the public secondary, 15 more seconds, to limiting costs and impacts on business and corporations. And I will put this into the record at the appropriate time.
That request has been covered under General Lee. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I'll yield myself 3 minutes.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I realize some people want to close their eyes and close their ears so they don't see or hear the facts. There is an old adage that none are so blind as those who don't want to see the wisdom of the facts. Mr. Chairman, despite the sound and fury that we've heard, let me repeat a fact. And the fact I want to repeat is this, that the bill always allows agencies to meet statutory objectives. If, for example, only one rulemaking alternative meets statutory objectives, the agency may adopt that alternative even if its costs exceed its benefits. The bill generally requires agencies to adopt the least costly alternative that meets statutory objectives if more than one alternative meets those objectives. Agencies may adopt more costly alternatives to protect public health, safety, and welfare, including worker safety. However, if the benefits of the more costly alternative justify their cost and the agency is acting to protect interests of public health, safety, or welfare that are within the scope of the statutory provisions that authorize the rulemaking. As a result, many Workforce Safety, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, and other public health, safety, and welfare regulations on the books still could have been adopted under the bill even if they were not the least costly alternatives. The difference is agencies would have done a better job of assessing whether those regulations really were the best ones to adopt and would have had a greater incentive to look harder for the alternatives that achieved the most benefits for the fewer cost. Further, the bill does not invite courts to immerse themselves in the weeds of whether agencies have satisfied every jot and tittle of how best to perform a cost-benefit analysis. Instead, it asks the courts to enforce the bill's least cost standard and allows the courts to defer to agency cost-benefit analyses that comply with guidelines from the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. As the D.C. Circuit most recently demonstrated in Business Roundtable versus SEC, the courts know well how to enforce requirements that agencies weigh the economic impacts of regulation without immersing themselves in endless arguments over every fine point of economic analysis. So the bill will actually decrease litigation. Mr. Chairman, this bill is really just a litmus test for all members of the House as to not whether they want to implement regulations or not, but whether they want to do so in the least costly manner possible. Again, I don't see how anyone can rationally oppose the objective of this bill. I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentleman from Michigan.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves.
Yep. 2 minutes.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I'll yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Peterson, who is the ranking member of the Agriculture Committee.
Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, gentlemen, and I rise today in support of H.R. 3010. Because, especially in agriculture, we have been dealing with innumerable problems that have been brought by regulations that are not properly vetted and seem to be from people that have a lack of understanding of exactly what's going on in agriculture. And it seems like we have some of these bureaucrats that are working on these regulations that they've basically set up. You know, they've claimed there's threat of lawsuits or whatever, and next thing you know, they're off doing regulations that have been kind of self-fulfilling prophecies on their part. So this legislation gives us an overhaul, I guess for the first time in 65 years in the Administrative Procedures Act, to make sure that we have more openness, more transparency, more accountability in these regulations, more time, more analysis, more compilation in how these regulations are developed and how we can improve this so we can improve the people's confidence in the process, to try to make sure that we're taking into account the costs of what these regulations are going to place not only on the businesses, but ultimately on the consumers that are affected by this. And in agriculture, you know, we have all these things that are coming down that I think people have a lack of understanding of just exactly what the effect is going to be. A lot of these regulations are going to have the effect of significantly increasing food costs to consumers in this country. And I just think a lot of these urban folks have no idea what they're doing, and the next thing you know, if these regulations got in place, they'd be back in Congress for more help for SNAP and for other programs, try to pay for the increased food costs that was put onto them by these regulations. And so the more we can open up this process, the more we can get people to understand the actual effect of these regulations and what they're going to accomplish if they're put into place, the better the situation is going to be. So I think this is a good step in the right direction. Personally, I would probably go even further than what's in this bill, but you know, it is probably what can be accomplished at this point. So I'm very happy to be here today to support this effort and look forward to having a successful outcome. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself a minute because the distinguished ranking member of Agriculture wasn't here when the ranking member of Mr. Miller of Education and Labor was here talking about the agricultural problems and the problems that H.R. 3010 presents to us. And what I'd like to just ask the gentleman, that yesterday the Food and Drug Administration issued a recall of both grapes and tomatoes for salmonella contamination. Did the gentleman have some reservation or objection to this regulation that the FDA operated on? And I'll yield to him.
Well, I think it